attention to the woman behind me. Once upon a time, there were some factory hog farms. We're talking huge. 10,000 head factory hog farms. The corporations that owned them wanted to expand their market share and unleash their unsafe quantities of ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and particulate matter into even more communities. So they looked to the T region of rural Pennsylvania, between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and what they saw was good. Lots of land, not many city folk to raise a fuss. So they went to the appropriate regulatory agency to get the permit applications to start building their factory farm. They didn't have to ask if anyone wanted to have a factory hog farm go in down the road and watch their property values drop because of the stench. They didn't have to ask if everyone was okay with their family hog farms that had been there for generations going belly up. They didn't have to ask if perpetrating massive animal cruelty was in the best interest of public safety. All they had to do was get a permit, the equivalent of getting a marriage license. Help! We're being invaded by factory hog farms that we don't want. Hi, folks. We're attorneys from a non-profit legal defense fund, and we can help you put a stop to the process. We find the holes and inaccuracies in corporate permit applications. And so it came to pass. The attorneys with the legal defense fund found the inaccuracies and omissions in the permit application, and the permit was denied. Hey, thanks guys. You found everything that needed to be changed. Makes my job a lot easier. So the application was resubmitted with the holes filled and the inaccuracies made accurate, and the permit went sailing through, approved. Hey, let's get together and pass a local ordinance that says yes to family farms and no to factory farms. And it came to pass. But as you can imagine, the corporate directors weren't exactly happy about that. In fact, they said, "That pesky local ordinance you passed, your brazen attempt to self-govern your community as you see fit, it discriminates against our constitutional rights as persons. Oh, and by the way, here's a lawsuit to provide us compensation for our lost future profits." So the rural Pennsylvania hog farms went back to the Legal Defense Fund for some relief. And they said, "Unfortunately, they are correct. Under our current structure of law, it's perfectly legal for a small number of people to override the wishes of an entire community. There's nothing you can do. You can't say no." Why? What about government of the people, by the people, for the people? Well, it's complicated, but basically it's because back in the 1800s, the Supreme Court started ruling in favor of corporations when communities tried to stop them from doing something harmful where they lived. Why? Well, it's complicated, but basically it's because some, not all, but some of the founding fathers set it up that way. We've never really been a democracy. What do you mean we're not a democracy? America the free and home of the brave. Well, it's complicated, but basically those revered founding fathers were landowners and slave owners, and they didn't like being restricted in their money-making activities. So they wrote in the Commerce Clause, catchy title, huh? Right into the Constitution to ensure their advantage, and called it a day. But that's not what we learn about in physics class. You're right, it's not. Isn't that interesting? And the Supreme Court has been very busy helping out with their rulings. 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Corporations have equal protection under the 14th Amendment, which was intended to guarantee freed slaves their citizenship rights. 1906, Hale versus Henkel. Corporations are protected from unreasonable health and safety inspections under the Fourth Amendment. 1931, Russian volunteer fleet versus United States. Corporations are protected from unlawful government seizure under the Fifth Amendment. I could go on. Oh, okay, I guess I get it, but if we pass some legislation about this, things will be okay, right? Nope. If we write letters to our congresspeople, things will be okay, right? Nope. If we get a Democrat in the White House, things will be okay, right? Nope. But if this is what we want in our community, why doesn't that matter? Why can't we say no to corporations or governmental agencies causing harm? Sorry. Because we are funneled into the regulatory system, the one built by corporate executives and their lobbyists, so we can feel useful and argue about parts per million, paper versus plastic, or how much of a river will be polluted instead of preventing damage being done in the first place. Oh, and you're going to love this. The folks in the legislature and state government, they work hand in hand to place the interests of corporations over and above the communities that they're elected to serve by a little something called preemption and Dillon's rule, the power to override local ordinances they don't agree with. It's insane, but you can't say no. I'll tell you what we're going to do. You figure out a way to write an ordinance that says in our county, corporations and legislatures do not have more rights than the people who live here, and that we are going to govern ourselves the way we see fit. Okay. Let me look into that for you. So they did. The Legal Defense Fund did their research. The community worked together to gather the signatures needed to put the ordinance on the ballot. The community voted on it, you know, like you do in a democracy, and it passed. Over 200 municipalities across the US and in other countries around the world have voted in these ordinances. They bring out into the open the constitutional legal question, do we live in a democracy or not, when they're contested in court by corporate lawyers. Hey, tell them what it's like to stick our necks out like that. Oh, right. How about a story? During World War I, at the first light of dawn on Christmas Day, 1914, some German soldiers emerged from their trenches and approached the Allied soldiers, calling out, "Merry Christmas!" The Allied soldiers climbed out of their trenches, shook hands, played soccer, and exchanged gifts with the enemy. Both sides honored the Christmas truce for several days, until their superior officers ordered them to resume killing each other. Because, you know, we got a war going on here, people. That's just one example of the precedent, even for people trained to kill for a living, to put aside beliefs that we've been fed and stop pretending. And we, the people, are capable of the very same thing. Even though the executives who run corporations do everything in their power to stop us from saying no. Ordinary citizens are organizing themselves in the US, Ecuador, India, Australia, Nepal, and the European Union, just like they did here when this country was created, just like they did when slavery was abolished, or women wanted the vote, or people of color were so done with separate but equal. On your way out this evening, you'll have a chance to grab a democracy tickler file to take home with you. Inside it is an It's Not True card to remind you of those rural Pennsylvania hog farmers and their bravery in standing up to the corporate and legislative boys who laughed and said, "You can't say no." There's a funnel to remind you that the only thing the environmental regulations regulate are environmentalists. And there's a copy of the Minnesota State Constitution, Article 1, Bill of Rights. Government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people, in whom all political power is inherent, together with the right to alter, modify, or reform government whenever required by the public good. Right about now, your amygdala, the area of the brain that sets off the fight or flight response in your nervous system, might be causing some interesting reactions in your body. Some of you may be feeling angry, or skeptical, or afraid, or even excited about what you just heard. Wherever you fall on the emotional scale, I say some public good is now being required. You in, Minneapolis?
Yeah.